Thank you, Annie, and thank you all for being here at UX Beers. I wanted to say the first UX Beers, I think, in 2013 at Coffee Labs. I was there at that time, so I'm already a long time visitor of this UX Beers. So you might think that I'm getting really old now because, yeah, that's something I can tell about a lot of things I did in the past, but a rocking chair is not yet for me, although I was injured during this year. But let's skip the chair and let's keep on rocking. So Bavo asked me, can you do a talk at UX Beers? And I said, okay, yeah, why not? I can come up with a list of 50 things I would like to tell about user experience and all things that I learned during those past few years. And it might even look like a plan looking in retrospect now. But yeah, then he made a post, 50 learnings. Okay, yes, you read it right. It's really 50 items. And then I thought, oh, 50 is really a lot, isn't it? How do I get to a list of 50 items to talk about? And I thought, okay, when we take big projects, we should take it like a pizza and cut it into smaller pieces. Otherwise, a whole pizza you cannot digest in one time. So I said, okay, let's take these 10 items that I can talk about. And for each of those items, I can come up with 5 items, and then 10 multiplied by 5 makes 50. Okay, then I have 50 items to talk about. Will this be possible and feasible in the 30 minutes that I have? So let's start with some quotes. A quote I really like to use, it's a Pippi Langkous. I never did it, so I think I can do it. And I think as a UX designer in the last couple of years, I became 3 years ago, I became freelancer. And it's a little bit with this mantra in mind that I start doing it. Okay, I never did it, so I think I can do it. And also workshops I gave at several clients I worked for, sometimes workshops within contexts I did not felt 100% comfortable, but okay, I thought I never did it, so maybe I can do it. Another thing I would like to say in quote is anger is an energy, but that was PIL, a group from the 80s, I think. But I would like to change the anger into eager, and it's a little bit a link to the previous one. I never did it, so I think I can do it. The eagerness we have to be keeping to still learn and go on learning, and that's something I think as a UX designer you should keep that in mind. Another more common quote by Edward Tufte, a data analyst from UK, I think, is the most common user action on a website is to flee or go away. And that's, I think, a very important quote to deal with when you have customers that think that the sun is shining right from their ass. It's something we should always take into account, that the most sites that people are using is not the site you are working on. And it makes us very humble, or it should make us very humble, and that's something we should always take into account. Another quote I like to use a lot is, okay, especially when I became freelancer, when I said my day rate, people were often surprised by that rate. And then I come up with this quote, okay, maybe it's expensive, but you should look at the cost of bad design. I think Davy told us that it is very important to deal with those 3 stakeholders in a project. And of course, taking the designer all the way to the end might be the best thing to do. Otherwise, you can come up with projects that are not well designed. Also, a quote I used a time at Solvay, I think. We did a project there when I was working at another company. And it was a huge website with, if I remember correct, 10 or 11,000 pages. And we did a data track on those pages. And there were pages online for 3 to 4 years, and they were not visited once by a user. So not even the one who published the page did not visit the website. So it's not because of a very big company that you need those pages online. So we threw all those pages away, and then we came up with a much slimmer and faster, technically also better website. And something I learned during the last couple of years on a project I work for, I often try to do, okay, UX, it's a mindset. UX, it's not something from a team. You need to change your culture in your company, etc., etc. You need a strategy, I mean, for a better UX. But if a company is not ready to follow that new strategy, yeah, the culture of the company will throw all your efforts away. So therefore, culture eats strategy for breakfast is also something to keep in mind. And if you want to change something in the strategy, you should take a closer look to the culture in first. So that was about the 5 quotes. Then I'm going to talk about a few projects I did way back in time. I think in 1998. I made the website, the Standard Online. Of course, I did not do it by myself. I needed a lot of developers for that. But when I was designing this, we took all kinds of possibilities into mind, and we created really nice looking, at that time, pages. But then there was, this silly word that came up. The actuality made it that there were massavernietigingswapens, of weapons of mass destructions. And this word fucked up my complete design because it was a word which was too long. And yeah, we should always keep that into mind. Another project, and it's very nice to see that Jan is in the audience. I worked together with Jan at Truvo at the time. And there I designed the interface for a web building application. And it was also very interesting to see that from these sketches that I made, and afterwards we made it in more Photoshop-like designs. And then at the end, it became a real working application. And when I was doing this project, I was working at Emakina. And the server where it was hosted was called emakina.something else. When I came at Truvo at that time, and the people working with those tools, they all called it the Emakina, because it was the tool was named after the URL. But it was really interesting to see how these sketches that I made on my own desk, isolated and not connected with anybody else, that it became developed and it became used by, I don't know how big the web team there was. It was like 50 or 40 people or even more. It was interesting to see that, yeah, you start small on paper, and then it suddenly becomes a real used software tool. It was cool to see. I was impressed at the time. Another interesting, and Guido is here as well, from Colruyt. Dag Guido. Also an interesting thing to do was I did workshops with Colruyt from sketches and from what we wanted to build. We created product tiles that made it possible for customers to see on a better, more clear way that there was an item by piece, or you can buy an item by packed by 8. Because we discovered that at the Collect and Go at the time, when they were picking orders, sometimes people asked, okay, I will give me 6 cans of iced tea, and then the order picker said, okay, they needed 6 cans, but they were packed by 8, so he took out 2, and there was a lot of handling, but people did not realize that some of those packages were done by 8 and not by 6. So we introduced this new feature, and therefore people ordered the item in the volume that was already available. Another interesting project I did recently is the guidelines for digital projects for Testaankoop. And we came up with these 7 guidelines for them to give them direction to how to tackle digital projects. I think I could do a presentation only on these 7 things, but as time flies, I don't have time to get into detail there. So with those guidelines, we built lots of flows and ways to tackle all their digital challenges. And last but not least, one of the projects I'm involved in at the moment is a postgraduaat, which is also held at Artevelde Hogeschool, together with Duke and Grace in the Pocket and Leap Forward. And since this year, I'm co-coordinating this together with some colleagues at Artevelde. If you want to know anything about user experience in 30 lessons during a year, contact me and we can see. Or you can even ask Guido, who did the course, I think the first year, and now we are going for the 3rd round. So some of the people I met during those last 20 years and why I placed them here is that I would like to say, if you're working in UX or anywhere else, try to connect with people that inspire you and try to learn from them and see what they can bring to the table. I will talk later to, Jean-Pierre, he introduced me to and that was way back again, to what Jacob Nielsen was telling and the books he was writing, and which also broadened my horizon from mainly web design to a more strategic and more user-friendly usability part of the web design. Same happened with Jeff Kottelf, which I got into when he was writing his book about lean UX and how the lean and agile way of working, how it could be linked with what we as UX designers are doing. Of course, a bit cheesy, but my family, of course, is also very important in the 5 people. There are 4, but and then I would also like to mention Erik Willemse. I worked together with Erik at Colruyt Group, and he was also a very inspiring person for me. When I became freelancer, I could ask him a lot of things, details about day rate, boekhouder, and all kind of stuff. So that's also, I think, a very interesting thing to know if you know someone, go talk to them and learn from them as much as possible. A very quick brief to the companies I worked with or for, or when I was not a freelancer yet, was Uniway, which was the first web company I worked for. Emakina was another company I worked for after Uniway, and at Emakina I I started working for Gouden Gids, which was Truvo at the time, and then they asked me to join them and work for them. So I started working there, and now finally I have my own company, which is called Hoofdwerk, which I do as a freelancer, and I do all kinds of UX work for anyone who is asking. And last but not least, I'm now also teaching. I'm teaching UX and UI to students, and as I already mentioned, the experienced architect postgraduate. 5 books I would like to mention. I already mentioned Jacob Nielsen, Designing Web Usability. It's probably already a little bit outdated at this time, but still the Nielsen Norman Group, which gives very good trainings as well. And this was for me the first book which made it which made me realize that designing things is not something to do from a designer perspective, but also, not also, but mainly from a user perspective. Which brings me to a very well-known book as well, which builds upon that. Don't Make Me Think, from Steve Crook. I don't know who has this book at home. So the ones who don't have it yet, don't hesitate. It's really it's still with all the issues that they are giving, it's still very useful tool. Another interesting book was Change by Design from Tim Brown. He was the founder of IDEO, a design company from the United States. And it made me think when Davy was earlier this evening talking about those 3 stakeholders, the designer, the customer or client, and the developer, exactly. I was waiting for you, Davy. In this book, Tim Brown he points it out as feasibility as the developer part, the desirability as the consumer or client side, and then the third part, feasibility, desirability, likability. It's a desirability. No, there's a desirability. Viability. The viability part, which is the customer or business side. So you have the designer part, which is the likability or desirability, and then the feasibility, which is the role of the developer, of course. And those are lessons I took from this book. And then already mentioned Jeff Gothelf, Lean UX, which helped me when I was working at Gouden Gids, when there was a developer team and they did development sprints. Lean UX explains a little bit to me, it was new at that time, that okay, if you have a development sprint, how as a designer you can interfere with that or interact with that, and the best way to do it is to come up with your designs in a few sprints before your development sprint starts, and then those design sprints should always follow the mantra of 3 important words that says build, measure, learn. So build your prototype, measure how it works, and learn from it, and then rebuild your new prototype. And once all your hypotheses are clear, then you can give that prototype or designed prototype to the development team in that sprint. Also a very complete book of service design, and there it starts touching UX and service design, that it becomes a very fluid thing, but I come back to that later. And another interesting book to mention is Design a Better Business, which I like a lot about this book, is that they focus a lot on the iterative process of designing, where if you know the double diamond from Google, where you have those 4 stages, where you have the first one to discover, then define, then design, and then deliver. There is, within that flow, which is very linear, there is no loop back, and in this process they give it back. Also an interesting thing in this book is when you are a designer, you're a little bit a rebel, but a rebel with a cause, of course, which is something I like a lot, because as a designer, you always have to ask those difficult, annoying questions to customers, to ask them, why do you need this, and do you really need it now, and at what time do you, and why, and repeating why. It's, yeah, it makes you a little bit the annoying guy in the room, but it's something I like doing, actually. Then another category, songs and podcasts. It used to call Techmag van Magali Dereux, and yeah, it's also interesting to read and to, not to read, but to hear what in interviews she is doing. Another one I like to listen is Listen to the Future, and where they have interesting talks on all things technology. I don't know, from my Ghent connection, I know these guys, of course, the Computer Club. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but it's funny to listen to, and also interesting. And then I thought, okay, I need 5 podcasts, but I'm not that much into podcasts, so I needed to come up with 2 more things to fill my 5 items for podcasts. So I changed it to songs. So a song I can see clearly now. I think we all know that. I'm not gonna sing it, but I can see clearly now. The rain has gone. But why I think it's an important song to mention in the design process is it's always very messy, and it always starts in all directions, but it's at the end that it becomes more clear, and at that time you can start singing, that you can start seeing clearly now. It's the roller coaster of emotion when you have the idea, okay, I have a new project, I start with it, but okay, it's become complex, and it's, oh fuck, it's really complex now, I don't understand it at all, and then you are here deep in the mud, or as mentioned here, in the shit, and then you start to discover items, and once you realize what solutions might be, then you come up to a next phase, and then it's when you start singing, I can see clearly now. And then the last song I would like to mention is Firestarter from The Prodigy, because it's a nice 90s song as well. But also the Firestarter part, I think as UX designer, sometimes you need to be the detonator, or you need to be someone who brings a little bit shock into a system to change or to make things move. So some of the lessons I learned during the last couple of years. Everything is design was something I always thought as a designer. I was trained and formed in St. Lucas as a designer. So I thought everything is design. But actually, when I look back, nothing is really designed. Some things stick up to each other, so it's all kind of mess stuff sometimes, and you need to discover some line into it, and that not everything is always intended the way it is something I learned during the last couple of years. It's something I used in a discussion a few years back, that I was opposing an opinion of a guy in a boardroom. It happens to be the CEO. And then one of my colleagues was telling me that I should shut up and stop being the annoying guy with the annoying questions, because the CEO was the one who paid my salary. And I did not agree, because it's not the CEO who pays my salary, it's the customer who does pay my salary, and it's even the CEO who's paid by the customer as well. Those were very tense or harsh discussions. So an important lesson too, keep calm and carry on. Everything goes with the flow, and sometimes you need discussions, but once you get out of that discussion, keep calm and carry on. A very important thing to say as UX designer, I think it depends. It's all about context. We all know that. So it's something you can say repeatedly. And another important lesson, and that's from a project, I think it was at the Standard, it was at the Standard, that we've messed up with a project. It was, the release date was postponed with more than a month, and we were really, really stressy because at that time we needed to make a presentation on what the release date would be and what issues that were still there. And the whole team was in kind of stress. And then the project owner from the Standard came to the meeting room, and he felt that tension, and he felt that there was something really, really wrong. And this is what he asked. Did someone die? Because what's happened? And then, of course, people start explaining what the problem was. And he said, okay, it's not good, but it's not the end of the world. There are not people died, so let's carry on and move on, and let's build the project to a next level. And it's something I always remembered, that, okay, it might be a hell of a problem at that time for the project manager, but it's not life-threatening. So I'm not, at least not working in life-threatening situations. A quick review of 5 jobs I did in the past. I started as a DTP operator at Gazet van Antwerpen, but as we all know, the more your newspaper of Tuesday looks like the one on Monday and looks like the one on Sunday and looks like the better you're doing your job. So there was not much variation, and I did not like that, so I skipped it. And I went for another company to develop packaging. After a packaging, I think 3 or 4 packaging projects, of course, there you had the same thing, that every package looks like the same. It should relate to one another. So it was not very exciting for me as well, so I skipped that too. And then I started working online, and then it was with the Euro 2000 website that I think I started working with websites. And then I became an information architect, which was called UX designer back in the day. And then after that, I became the freelancer that I'm now. But as UX designer, which is often the term that is used by lots of people, I don't really like the word designer, because if you use that in the Belgium context, when people say designer, they think about how it looks. It looks nice. They think about the colors and the form of it. But of course, English-speaking people probably don't relate to design as only that, but it's bigger than that. So therefore, I think UX definer would be a better term to use in this context. And I think it's the last item. So some of the items I used over the last couple of years is Macromedia Fireworks at the time. Then I started using OmniGraffle and Axure, then XD, and the last couple of months, I think, it's Figma. And I don't know how many people around here are using Figma, and how many people changed during the last year. Okay, so it's almost half of it. So, okay, that's something I think we need to take into account, that in 3 years' time, we probably won't be using Figma, but we will be probably using something else. A tool I use a lot is, of course, these Post-its, but not like in this picture, but more like in this picture, where I always ask people to use those one item per each. We all know the drill, of course. And for this, I use those Sharpie or other single-use, the fat line pen, because otherwise people would like to write a whole book and not just a few keywords, which is not always a good thing to do. A very interesting tool I still use daily, paper. I think the old school tools like pen and paper are still applicable today. And last but not least, this is a roost stand I use, and it's to illustrate that as a UX designer, and of course as a freelance UX designer, you're always mobile. So try to get as mobile as possible and be wherever your office is. We used to work remote long before COVID was already applicable. A few websites I would like to mention. It's the Interaction Design Foundation. I don't know if anyone is familiar with this one. It's a very interesting one, and you can learn a lot of things there. The UX Collective, also very interesting to read topics there. And of course, the last year, I learned to use Miro a lot with larger groups. Before it was called real-time board, and then I used it with smaller groups because then we could still meet in person like we do today. As a freelancer, in the beginning, I visited a lot the Unizo website, which was to me a very very interesting source of information. And of course, still at the end, I would like to mention the Experience Architect website, which I'm the last 3 years coaching and learning a lot of things over there. And that's to conclude the talk of today. Being coach in this postgraduate and also giving class to young people is something that I really like doing, because it makes me, I think, a better professional in all other aspects of UX design. If you need to explain what UX is all about to people who don't know it, you start thinking more precisely what it is all about, and I think you can become better. So as a last tip, maybe, if you want to become a real good UX designer, start teaching. It can help. And it's the last slide.
I think you did it. I think you came in
50? I think it was even
under
more
50
than 50
minutes. That's a good thing. Thanks so much. Does anyone have anything to add to that list? Or any questions for Maarten while we're here?
I can emphasize the last point. If not, get an intern. Get juniors, get interns. They ask you why you do certain things that you've been doing for years, and having to explain it is so weird.
Get an intern.
Think about your own process.
Exactly.
That's true. Yeah, interns ask lots of questions and make you think about your own process and make you explain it.
Yep.
That is a very good practice.
Exactly.
Good tip. Good tip.
So
Thanks
that's
for
being the
including
internal teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for including Erik Willemse, by the way. He's such a smart guy. He's also one that's like not quite in the rocking chair yet, but has so much wisdom to
Absolutely.
depart. He's a longtime member of UX Beers, and actually he gave a talk a few years ago that still sticks in my mind about CRUD design. CRUD, create, read, undo.
No, I think it was Steven you mentioned.
Yeah,
Steven did the one on CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. I think the one on with the bees, maybe? The bees?
I thought it was Erik Willemse. Anyway, it was a great talk, and he's a very smart guy, regardless
Absolutely.
of
That's
who
true.
gave this
That's
talk.
absolutely true.
But thanks for the 50 things, and thank you for joining us tonight. We will be back next month, but in Brussels, to shake it up again. Imakina will host. It'll be on the last Tuesday of the month, so hopefully we'll see you there if you can make it. We always make them book a different venue that's closer to a train station, so check the Meetup page and
I just want to say someone added on YouTube, but pay your interns well.
and pay your interns well. Thank you. Thank you, YouTube crowd. Okay, thanks to everyone who's here tonight, and thank you for our YouTube crowd who is also pitching in the chat online and asking good questions. And please enjoy a snack and a beverage, and till last man standing, I guess, tonight. All right. Cheers.
Thank you.